So on night one of a two-night interview on Later with Bob Costas that aired on September 16th, 1992, the actor talked about his role as the sensitive guy and where it came from. And it came from going into the family business. And his dad had been a burlesque comedian before making it as a television and film actor. And so young Alan Alda was a burlesque actor as a kid and saw it all. So he was very desensitized to normal relationships between men and women. And that's the theme of this conversation. It dovetails nicely into promoting his current project, which was a stage production of a Neil Simon play called Jake's Women. And it dealt exactly with that, the relationship between men and women and the differences.
This is today's 12, WICU TV, Erie.
Thanks for staying up later. We're very pleased to have Alan Alda with us, having completed another performance in Neil Simon's Jake's Women, appropriately enough, at the Neil Simon Theater. And while most folks, I guess, watching around the country don't often get to see a stage production and therefore know you more from movies and, of course, from MASH on television, your roots are in the stage as much as any place else, right?
That's true. And I think I like acting on the stage better than any place else.
Why?
Well, I think because it's such a complete experience. You get ready for the show a couple of hours in advance, and then once the play starts, you're completely in this imaginary experience until it's over, and then there's a glow afterwards. At least I have in this play, a glow that lasts for another couple of hours, and you don't get that feeling acting in a movie because you have to do it in very short pieces, and you sit around in between those pieces losing your concentration, and you have to get yourself up, and it's all, and you know, the thing about making a movie is I don't think most people realize this. It's a very intellectual process. The stage is much more visceral. It's paradoxical too, because movies are supposed to be spontaneous because the camera's in real close on you, and you must have that spontaneity for it to work for the audience, and it is not rehearsed nearly as much, so it needs to be spontaneous for that reason. And yet, it's a very intellectual process because you have to read the script and figure out way in advance how you're going to play something.
You were Tony nominated for this role, and it's generally been well received, but you are well aware of what the criticism is of it, which is Neil Simon, always funny, the laughs are there, Alan Alda and the rest of the cast does a fine job, but the situations are pat, and their resolutions are pat.
Well, I'm not well aware of the criticism. I usually, in fact, earlier in the run, I would have stopped you before you told me that, because I didn't read the reviews, and I just find it distracting. But just I guess you want me to answer what you just said, and it's, if that was said, if that's a fair representation of what they said about the play, I don't agree. I think it's, I think the theme of this play is a very rich one, because it has to do with, Jake's Women has to do with Jake's relationship to the women in his life. But really, it's every man. I think every man in this studio right now, and probably every man listening to us, has had women in his life make the same complaints to him that Jake's women make to him, and we're struggling to figure out what to do about those complaints because we don't like to hear them. We don't. I mean, they have to do with whether or not we can be intimate enough with the women that we do. Our sweethearts, our mothers, our girlfriends, our wives. Can we really be intimate with them in a way that satisfies them and satisfies us?
You know what would really shake my life up, Sheila? You know what would really, really change my life?
What's that, Jake?
I want to move. It's time I moved, Sheila.
Well, I thought that you loved this place.
I did love it. I don't love it anymore. I want a new place, Sheila. I want a new start. A new beginning for you and me. You understand what I'm saying?
You want me to move in with you?
Yes. Not now, someday, later on in the future.
And it's a tough problem because we almost seem to come from two different species or two different planets sometimes. And that's not a trivial theme. I think since it seems to cover about the entire human race, I think it's not a trivial theme. It's true, it's not about why can't we end war or why can't we feed the hungry. Those are also non-trivial themes. But they aren't the only kind of non-trivial theme, you know. So I think he's dealing with something very important here, and it's a brutally honest play. I mean, I have never seen him write, and I've seen few playwrights write so honestly about their role in this difficult transaction between men and women.
You're an actor, so you can get, in theory, into any character and make it convincing. But you're also a well-known public personality, and people know what your sentiments are on feminism, on relationships between men and women. Did that pose an obstacle for you in playing this guy? Did you wonder, people would come in and say, I know Alan Alda wouldn't be quite this caddish?
Actually, I didn't give any thought to what people would think about me with regard to this persona that I have, where I'm supposed to be Mr. Nice Guy. You know? I would have given it some thought if it were a movie. I thought that on the stage, it doesn't matter. On the stage, you get to play the play, and if the play is interesting, and if you do a good job, that's all I care about. I felt that there were more substantive considerations there. It may not be true. I don't know. Things may have changed. But I wouldn't have thought that the problem was the way you phrased it. I would have thought that the problem was, oh, here he is dealing with soft issues again. Men and women, who cares? We heard that story already, you know. Whether or not I play a guy who's hard to reach, sort of, I think, wouldn't matter if you were going to only worry about image. But I decided to stop worrying about image. I really can't do anything about it. I'm just trying to play things that interest me. See, I always thought I played different people. I didn't think I played the same guy over and over again. I guess because I use myself, but I think that's all you have to use. But I used myself as much or more when I played a really bad guy in the Woody Allen movie in
Crimes and
Misdemeanors than I ever did when I played a nice guy. I mean, I tried to see if I were that bad guy, how would I do it, you know? So I played a lot of different guys, I thought, and they're not all nice guys. But if I get tagged with that, then that's just like, it's like catching a virus. You got to do the best you can with it, even though you have a little fever all the time.
Was it annoying to you, or amusing, or some combination for a while? I guess it's still out there, but it was more noticeable maybe 10 years ago, when your name almost became synonymous with a certain kind of attitude, men trying to become more sensitive and less like the stereotypical man of the 50s and 60s.
Well, it was sort of flattering at first, then it was sort of annoying, and then I just kept waiting for it to blow over, and it's sort of blown over now, I think.
What's the roots of your outlook? I read an interview that was, I guess, published maybe a decade ago, and you talked about having polio as a kid and the role that women played in your recovery and in shaping your character.
Yeah,
is that a coincidence and just an easy hook, or?
Yeah, I think it made a good way for me to make a point, but it couldn't possibly have been the roots of why I was such an active feminist. I really don't know what those roots are. I think they're much more complicated than that. I mean, the story that you're talking about is that my life was saved by my mother, who diagnosed the fact that I had polio when I was 7 years old, and then that I would have been paralyzed or dead if I hadn't been given the treatment that was invented by a nurse in Australia whose name was Sister Elizabeth Kenny, the Kenny treatments. And the feminist point at that time that I wanted to make was that Elizabeth Kenny discovered this treatment about 20 years earlier and was prohibited by the medical profession, who were all men, from using it because they said nurses are not going to tell us about medicine. We know about medicine. She had a treatment that was the exact opposite treatment that they were trying to use, which was killing kids, you know. So I was lucky enough to get her treatment just about a year or so after it was introduced to this country. I just got in under the wire. And that seemed like an important connection, personal connection that I had to the kind of subjugation of women that had been practiced up till the kind that had been practiced up till that point. But that's not why I was so interested in it. I don't know why. It's complicated. I had a troubled childhood. My mother was mentally ill, and that had to have shaped my early awareness of women. I didn't in ways that may be the reverse of what I finally wound up, opinions I finally wound up feeling passionately about. For the first 3 years of my life, I was standing in the wings in burlesque theaters watching strippers and chorus girls who made me sort of a mascot in the theater. This little kid that they embraced and cared for. Watching them dance erotically at the age of, without their clothes on, at the age of 2 and 3, it's got to have some kind of a strange effect on you. My parents allowed it with the best of intentions, I suppose, thinking that it was just you have an innocent kid, it's an innocent experience. It's not an appropriate thing to do.
This would have been around 1940 when maybe, in fairness to them, information was less available about...
Yes, that's right, exactly. People also think that burlesque was more innocent in those days, but it wasn't. In fact, I was just talking to somebody who worked with my father. She was a stripper at the time, and she said, it was very degrading what we had to go through. But she said, but your father was a real gentleman.
It's interesting that your dad, Robert Alda, screen and stage actor, did not want you to be an actor. People would think it's just natural. It's a family and show business.
He was very much like me as a parent. I discouraged my kids from being actresses, and then I wrote parts for them. And he,
right.
and he tried to discourage me, and then he tried to talk people into helping me to get my first job and that kind of thing. He didn't want me to do it because he knew how hard it is, and I know how hard it is, and I would discourage my kids, have discouraged my kids from it. But when you see this young kid with all this enthusiasm and talent, I had a lot of talent as a kid. I had more talent than ability, and you see that you want to help them if their brought me out on stage was in burlesque. I was 6 months old, and then again when I was 3 years old, and I got a dime.
Oi, my neighborhood! I want to tell you.
This little kid. But then when I was 9 years old, my father used to take me around to perform for soldiers and sailors during the war at the Hollywood Canteen. And we did Abbott and Costello routines. And I was Costello. And it was the first time I consciously got laughs from the audience and could control the laughter. It was a very intoxicating experience. But I loved working with him. To answer your question, we had this thing going between us as father and son. We could just play a moment out and time it together with total ease because we knew each other so well. And I've come to understand in my work that the relationship you have with the other actor off stage is the most important part of your work. The most important part of my preparation for doing Jake's Women every night is to go down in the basement and sit with the other actors and have a cup of tea and talk and just tell stories, but make contact with them, get our blood going together, and get our focus on one another. And we take that focus on each other out on stage with us, and the play becomes like whipped cream. It's the easiest thing to do. On the contrary, it's a very unsettling experience to be out on stage and have somebody walk on stage to play a scene with you who you haven't seen since last night in that same scene. It starts to gets like your life is compartmentalized, like this isn't real. It doesn't count. But if you have all these things going with one another, the look in the eye, the unconscious awareness of gesture and feelings and emotion, you find out how they slept last night and all that stuff, and that comes on stage, that's rich. That's a lot to work with. When you relate to each other, you're not pretending. You're really there for each other.
I would guess that even with all the trappings of television that get in the way of spontaneity, the equipment and the absence of a live audience to give you the immediate feedback and possibly shooting out a sequence, you had that familiarity in 11 years on MASH that
was the
had
most
to be
important
like what
element
you were
we
talking
had.
about? I mean,
Yeah.
the cast essentially was the same throughout the entire time, and you knew one another, and you shared in the success and in making it better?
And we started on the first day working toward that. Fortunately, when we began shooting, it was very cold, and we were playing in Hawaiian shirts. We were shooting in December in the mountains in Malibu, and we were playing a show that was supposed to be in Korea during the summer. And we were freezing. And between shots, we'd put on parkas, and we'd huddle around a big fire in one of those oil drums, and we'd hug one another. And within a day, we all knew each other pretty well. You know, you stand there hugging people for a day, you let go of your inhibitions, and you say, these are the people that I'm committing myself to. And we did. And we were all very different. We had a lot of personality problems, the way any group of people would. I don't think it was unusual. But we accepted one another for who we are, and we would kid about it. In the same way that in the show, everybody had his own characteristics that you got fun from. In real life, we had our own characteristic behavior that we would make fun of to one another's face. And it reduced the tension, but it also brought us in on one another. We were together. We were a group. We had a group experience. That plus the great writing. Well, there were two very strong elements that worked together.
Suppose you had the same line on stage, in a TV show, and in a movie. And maybe the best example, at least that I can think of, is something like Same Time Next Year, which is a play that was a movie. It looks like a play, even on the screen.
Yeah.
How do you deliver it differently in each of those three settings? Same line.
I know. You know. Well, by that time, you're not thinking about how you do it. I mean, by the time you're making a movie, everything you do is in terms of the camera. You're telling the story in terms of the camera. Maybe the simplest answer is that you do it the same way, only you talk louder on the stage. It's interesting that the difference between television and films to me is mainly that the screen is smaller. Again, it's a simplistic thing. The screen is smaller in television, and that's one reason why you see broader acting on television, and you see less ambiguous camera work. On a big screen, you can show a wide shot and let the audience find some little important detail down in the corner of the frame. But on television, the camera is showing you where to look. It's less ambiguous. It's less. It's more directed, and therefore less subtle, because it's hard to have two things going on at once that are ambivalent when you're only being told what to look at and what point you're supposed to get it at a time. So all of those elements tend to play into the way you do it. I mean, they sort of force you into certain things. But I've just tried to be a good actor in any one of those things. I think most people do.
How do you know when something's funny when you're doing a TV show or a movie in the absence of that immediate feedback? MASH was very, very funny, but there isn't an audience there telling you that moment to moment.
Well, you know in the back of your head. I think it's the same thing when you're writing. You write it. It comes to you. You don't know where it came from usually, but you just something in your head says, "Oh yeah, that's funny. That's good."
It's always an easy thing to attach a whole body of beliefs to a single incident, especially if it happens during childhood or early adulthood. And obviously the thing is much more complex than that.
Yeah.
But still, it's very interesting. And I didn't know this till I went over the research, that you were a gunnery officer in the ROTC.
Not quite. Right? I don't know. I was just thinking the other day why that keeps why they kept writing that. I think I told somebody in an interview once that I was upset that when I realized I was teaching people how to kill the greatest number of people with a mortar shell. So they presumed I was a gunnery officer. I was in the infantry, and they used mortars in the infantry, the little handheld mortars, you know. I wouldn't have had the mathematics to be a gunnery officer. And I think they used to say about an actor that his main objective when he came on stage was to get off stage as fast as possible, because he's so nervous about acting. And I think my main objective as an infantryman was to get to the rear as fast as possible.
Who do you see, if anybody, on screen, or I'll broaden it, on stage, any area of performance, and you say, I can't do that?
Oh, I can't do that? A lot of people can do what I can't do. Almost anybody who...
I don't mean juggling or...
No. I mean, this isn't false modesty either. Anybody who's really, really true to himself or herself can do things that I can't do because I'm not them. And that's the way in which I mean it. I try to be true to myself, and therefore I can do things that a lot of them can't do. Basic acting skills, I think I have most of those. But that's the craft of it, the art of it, of living and breathing and filling your mind with the character and the event. I can do when I'm tuned in to both myself and the imaginary circumstances of the play. And so can a lot of other people, but we all do it in a different way, in a slightly different way.
Alan Alda has been good enough to agree to come back tomorrow night, which means waiting for a few minutes, turning the tape on again, and getting this over with. We'll have 2 shows, and we'll talk about movies, and we'll talk about MASH if you're with us tomorrow night. See you then.
Thanks for watching Cleveland Live Music. It's awfully bright out here. I'd click on another one of my videos. Quit looking into the sun. Your mother told you not to do that. Please hit the subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel more, there's GoFundMe and Patreon information in the video descriptions. Ooh!